In this video, I'll add a little bit more context to what Jay has already thoroughly explained about foundation excavation and excavation in general. Now, I want to add some background on benching. Both the video that Jay discussed and the next video with some actual footage from construction sites will talk about benching. We'll drill this concept in that anything greater than a 1.5 meter depth will necessitate benching, and then once you begin benching, it should be at a 45-degree or 1-to-1 step size. Now, this information it is based off of the OSHA 1926 Subpart P Appendix B about sloping and benching. And if you read more into this appendix, you'll see that these numbers are not necessarily blanket numbers for all soil types, right? This depends on a specific type of soil classification. Because our soils are classified visually and they're not brought into a lab to get tested, we choose the middle ground, which is the most likely soil that we're going to be experiencing on site. However, there is a good chance that that soil is actually much stronger or has some more cohesion than what we're assuming with our 1-to-1 ratio. And you'll also notice that as you dive into the Subpart P Appendix B, you'll see that temporary slopes are different than permanent slopes in what they are, what is allowed. So this is a little background on benching, where that information comes from. You can read more about soil classification. You can read more in Appendix B here. But our general rule, the EIA safety rule, has developed based on the OSHA standard, but it is not always 100% compliant with the OSHA standard. And keep that in mind when you are putting together your excavation drawings. Use the EIA sanctioned recommendations for benching above 1.5 meters in depth, and then at a angle of, or a bench size of 1 meter rise and 1 meter run. So, like I discussed, soil class and temporary slopes are things that the Appendix B goes into a little further. In addition to that, we also have some new QC forms. Like I mentioned in the previous video, and we'll mention all these additional information videos, is we have the photo icons and pencil icons to indicate as-built dimensions and when quality control photos need to be taken. And one thing I want to touch on here is height versus elevation. So it's really important how you interpret this, these words in the quality control forms and the construction process. When measuring a height or a depth or a width, that's going to be a relative dimension. That's going to be for a foundation 1 meter or 1.5 meters or 0.5 meters. And an elevation is going to be where that foundation or where that tier sits in space. So like I mentioned in the previous video, it's really important that we know where our bridge sits in space. And the earlier we can extrapolate this information from building our foundation or building our tiers, the better, so that we can corroborate any errors early on. So when the forms ask you to record a height, that would be a relative dimension of the tier or the foundation. And when they ask you to record an elevation, that means you need to get the survey equipment out, or you need to measure to a known benchmark if it's close enough to measure with a tape. And a level, you need to measure to a known benchmark so that we can see where that foundation sits in space.